Hello! Welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me. A continuation of this book, the last video I'm going to make. The Case for UFOs. And apparently when Morris Jessup wrote his book, The Case for UFOs, some buddies, whether Illuminati, Masonic, or elites, aliens even, took a copy of his book and edited the book and sent it to the Department of the U.S. Navy. They were intrigued and called Morris Jessup up, the author, professor, astronomer, and said, look what we have. And Morris Jessup looked at the writing of the edited notes in the book that he published, and he said, wait a minute, I've been getting letters from a Mr. Allende, says the Allende letters, in the Vero edition, in the Case for UFOs, but he said, I've been getting letters from a Mr. Allende, and the handwriting seems to match one of those people editing the book. So, anyways, the eventual end of the story is Mr. Morris Jessup is found in Florida, dead in his car, with the tailpipe, a hose was taped to it, and taped into the window to pump the exhaust into his car to kill him. Some say murder. Of course, the government wants to say suicide. But the information, considering what's going on today in the world, apparently they're going to be erecting in New York City and in London the Gates of Baal, B-A-A-L. Go look it up, Baal images. And apparently the original entrance gates was in Lebanon, over there in Jerusalem, and a place called Palmyra, Lebanon, I think. Syria. So anyways, the gates of Baal in Syria at Palmyra were destroyed by supposedly the ISIS folks. It seems to me there's something much more suspect to the whole conversation. To the gates of Baal. Baal is Satan, Lucifer, Ra, Horus, Osiris, the demon god. Well, if you go look up the Temple of Baal that they're going to be erecting in New York and London, April 19th, which is an interesting day. But anyways, they're going to look something like what's on these Freemasonic books. See the two columns? What's with these temples? That's what these Freemasonic lodges are called, by the way. Temples. And King Solomon's temple in Israel, they're wanting to rebuild. Part of prophecy, by the way. The third temple. So the Temple of Baal in Palmyra, Syria, was destroyed supposedly by ISIS. That's strange. Why would they be preoccupied with that? Is ISIS fighting the devil? So it just occurred to me that the Freemasons and courthouses all over the country in many places have these columns that look like the Temple of Baal, and the Freemasonic buildings are called temples, and they're trying to rebuild King Solomon's temples. Remember, this series is Freemasonry and Satanism. And they have the double-headed bird with the eye above it, and the sun's rays, the sun god, witchcraft, paganism, and these creatures. with the snake symbol right there. Egyptian hieroglyphics. Something strange going on. More Freemasonic buildings called temples. So these, and even this magazine, the name of it, The New Age. There's just too many of the connections, connecting the dots here. That's called the New Age. It's got the Temple of Baal columns, all the Egyptian hieroglyphics. What's that got to do with UFOs and aliens? So you got more of the columns on a temple for the Freemasonic Lodge in a magazine called The New Age. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure this out. Something a little strange. Too many coincidences. So anyways, continuing with the last video I'm going to make on this book, with information I think is valuable. You know, a lot of people want to know who, what, why, what's going on, who's behind all this. What about the Bible, Jesus, Satan, Lucifer, the New Age, the Rainbow, the Gay Agenda, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. The militaries of the world, Vision for 2020, with all kinds of weaponry for the entire world. Insanity. That's all I gotta say. Insanity. Go look this up. Bizarre. So what's all I got to do with the Case for UFOs and the edited edition of his book delivered to the Department of Navy, and Allende himself getting a couple letters from Allende discussing the Philadelphia experiment where the U.S. military ship Eldridge was equipped with microwave transmitters, and we had turned them on. Brrr. The ship disappeared and apparently traveled in time and came back to its original position when the transmitters were turned off, with some of the humans half in and half out of the bulkhead. And then we've been going over this book with the aliens talking about something called a going into stasis and out of stasis, apparently even stopping time. Makes one wonder what our reality really is. So let me read on here. It should be interesting. Astronomy Speaks. The Incredible Decade. From 1877 to 1887. 10 years. The decade of great comets. We had a greater and more representative concentration of phenomena related to UFO activity than during any similar period prior to 1947. Alright, moving on. Had to get some water so I can speak a little clearer. Takes me a couple moments sometimes to get warmed up, to spit this stuff out clearly and make sense of it. So we know today they talk about Planet X, a dark sun, earthquakes, Yellowstone blowing up, pole shifting, all kinds of stuff. Comets nearly hitting the earth. But here from 1877 to 1887, apparently it was the decade of great comets. So nothing's changed. That's over 120, 30 years ago. So I'm only reading my highlighted portions. 1877, Dr. Kirkwood of Indiana University had commented on the unusual and increasingly large number of fireballs reported, and there had been a modest but steady increase in the number of comments discovered per year. 1877. So when I put all this stuff in the news right now, like, oh my God, the world's ending, these things are happening, these things have been happening all along. Moving on here, the true magnitude of the universe, of stars, nebula, was only beginning to dawn on the human intellect. The true magnitude of the universe was only beginning to dawn on the human intellect. And now we have all that propaganda about a flat earth. I wonder if somebody's just playing games with us. And another thought I had. Round earth, flat earth. How is that going to change our daily routine? Are they just doing that to try to distract people? I think so. I don't think they went to the moon. I don't think that the craft could get through the Van Allen belt, a electromagnetic shield around the earth, which protects us from cosmic particles. And those ships were kind of flimsy. If you look at pictures of the Apollo aircraft, they would have had little cosmic particles blasting the astronauts. And to have gone to the moon and back 7 or 8 missions, how many I'm not sure, to exactly land on the moon, take off from the moon and make it back, when, least we forget, the Earth goes around the Sun at 66,600, an unusual number, 666. But you can figure that out for yourself by just going on the internet and looking up the diameter of the path around the Sun that the Earth takes, and multiply that times pi, whatever the formula is, divide by pi, and you'll get the circumference around the whole Sun. Divide that by 365 days, by 24 hours, and you get 66,600. So that's kind of strange that the Earth would be hurtling through space around the Sun at 66,600 miles an hour, and then this Apollo craft would leave the Earth's gravitational field and not get left behind by this speeding Earth through space like a bullet. Just an interesting question. What's true? They couldn't get to the moon, and especially do it that many times without any incidences, when we know with the space shuttles, they blew up 2 of those many years later. And I'm an electronic technician. I worked at a major aerospace company for 10 years, and I'm telling you, 68, 69, 70 technology with the transistors and connectors was very poor. There were a lot of errors, a lot of failures in the electronic equipment. Not like today's laptops or computers. So anyways, just interesting conversation. There appeared sometime in 1877, without fuss or warning, a small but perfect and distinct crater. It was only a few short miles in diameter. So they discovered a crater on the moon. And the alien says, impression made by force forming a new ship's hull, made such holes, may been deep roughed by burner afterwards. So I'm just curious how they make these new ships, however they make these new ships, spaceships, the aliens, by creating them, force forming, They apparently leave a gigantic hole on the moon. The alien also says they don't know but very little about this galaxy that we live in. If they did shout for joy or weep for the tears of heartbroken, egotistical SM. So the alien says, we don't know but very little about this galaxy that we live in. And if we did, we'd shout for joy or weep the tears of heartbroken, egotistical SMs. One of the aliens. Moving on here. Round white spots and equally well-formed dark spots formed moving over the surface and went away. This would be on Jupiter. So back then, they had these strange things, 1878. Great disturbances broke out on Jupiter. So round white spots and equally well-formed dark spots formed, moved over the surface and went away. The alien says, the Great Arc. To have seen the Great Arc would humble or terrify any human. I wish even so that I could have seen it, the greatest structure ever built by humanoids or all time. So apparently they can build these facilities, these great arcs, using some kind of forced field technologies. And if you look at the UFO sighting websites like MUFON right now, look at some of the descriptions. And as we see when we go through this book, in the past 100 years, astronomers worldwide were looking up through telescopes or up at the sun and up at the moon and would see these gigantic ship-like things crossing the path in front of the sun or the moon or in the sky. Different descriptions. I use this glass as an example. Something huge, and then they would report it. Got to speak right here. When they would report it to the local astronomy center, and they published this stuff big time in magazines and newspapers. It was really popular back then. They're in the 1800s. Okay, Jupiter is practically, if not actually, a fluid planet, having an average density of only a little greater than that of water, and in spite of its vast bulk, its surface gravity is only 2.5 times that of Earth. It rotates on its axis with little less than 10 hours with an equatorial velocity of roughly 28,000 miles per hour. So Jupiter turns around at 28,000 miles an hour. Least we forget that the Earth spins on its axis about 1,700 miles per hour. And is so unstable, Jupiter, that different latitudes move with different speeds. Local spots, both defined and hazy, have movements of their own. Some pass each other at speeds up to 200 miles per hour. The clouds, spots, and belts appear to be floating on a liquid or gaseous base. Where do you hear what the alien says? Such an environment of the Great Red Spot, which appeared overnight in 1878, covered an area comparable to that of the entire terrestrial surface. Jessup says, we do not know the depth of the spot. Its silhouette shape was almost identical with that of the so-called aurora object, which passed over Europe and England in 1882. So some gigantic, like the aurora borealis over the North Pole, some auroral object passed over England and Europe in 1882. So I guess you could say a gigantic fluorescent glowing cloud passed over Europe and England in 1882. Now this being 2016, and we've got these weird anomalies happening now. Sometimes I gotta get my speaking straight. Alright. It was three-dimensionally symmetrical. It was shaped like a pecan, which is to say it had the shape of so familiar to UFO observers, the cigar, spindle, or zeppelin shape, but 8,000 miles in diameter and 30,000 miles long. So they observed some kind of object hovering in the atmosphere of Jupiter. 8,000 miles in diameter and 30,000 miles long. So moving on here, the alien says, I read, no life there at all, malfunction. So apparently this might, the alien's saying this is a gigantic arc. Because Jupiter's great size, complex, and turbulent condition, it would seem that most anything could happen on or around the huge orb. And the alien says the arc got stuck. So a gigantic arc, maybe the size of our moon, that they were building on Jupiter got stuck. Jessup says, it is a fair question to ask, whence came the power to drive this mass several times greater than the Earth through the surface material at such high speeds and to crowd aside the vast equatorial belts, sometimes as much as 8,000 miles. The alien says, such a mass would cause a huge explosion when it hit the great planet unless introduced with great care. So what happened back in the 1880s? Astronomers reporting these things. Why don't we, the people, know about this stuff? Much more to go here. I should estimate the diameter of the shadow from the part we could see on the moon as about 3/4 the diameter of the moon. So apparently, on the morning of the 21st of October, 1889, at 9 o'clock a.m., when on looking at the moon, Mr. Hurst found a large part of it was covered with a dark shade, quite as dark as the shadow of the Earth during an eclipse of the moon. Going on here, one could hardly resist the conviction that it was a shadow, yet it could not have been a shadow of any known body. No change in the position of the shade could be detected. After 3 hours of watching, 1878, November 26th, R.C. Russell. This is an important observation. It shows that things were going on in space and near the Earth. The shade seen by Hurst and Russell was either a cloud-like formation between the Earth and the moon, or it was the shadow of something between the moon and the sun. It had to be huge. The alien says, mind, deep mobilization, and muliae. Project mobilization for M. Chill and the building of it. So were they building another great ark? So reading on here, so it's just strange for people to know that crazy things were going on back then, and it might help us to consider this when we think about things they're telling us going on now. It is similarly obvious that the object itself must have been approximately the same size as the combined umbra or penumbra, shall we say about 1,400 to 1,700 miles in diameter, Jessup says. We cannot tell whether it was solid or a dense cloud. The alien says, old ark or old home ship. What's real? What's not? That is the question. Most important, however, is that this shade did not move for 3 hours' time, Jessup says. That it is controlled, firm, steady, calculated, and maintained control of position. It implies purposefulness, persistent delicacy, and intelligence. And the alien says, and reason too. Moving on, it was this phenomenon which invoked the scorn of armchair astronomer and editor Mr. R.A. Proctor in London, and caused him to publicly impugn the sanity, observational acuity, and even the good faith of Russell in a long and flippantly scurrilous letter to the Echo, a London evening paper, March 14, 1879. So it made the news. The alien says, a highly emotional letter, yelping the wounded feelings of a dog who thought secretly that the bone should have been his, only a howl for more prestige. So I was watching a video, CNN of all TV stations, saying that anybody who believed in conspiracy theories was mentally ill. Of course the Arabs with box cutters took down the Twin Towers. Really, on CNN. They said that anybody, and they also said about 80-something% of the population believes that 911 was an inside job, and that we are all mentally ill. That's what CNN promotes. Moving on with Jessup here. He showed a perceptible fear of admitting the reality of Russell's observation and sought to squelch the observer. The alien says, some scientists are merely children, many of them working to acquire prestige. The more prestige, selfish, small yapping children, yet so to some are nowadays mature. And one more sentence by the alien, let's see, it would be this one here with the dots. Mr. B, Duriel almost started a bonfire. So are there great objects in space controlled by some humanoids or alien creatures? Moving on here, the alien says, I do hope that this man either whistles in the dark or blasts the lid off. Perhaps then philosophical progress can be introduced. So the aliens are talking about the author. Peace restored in this our home planet, saved from prophesied end. However, either could be fatal to humankind, but the latter not at all if handled properly. So apparently this particular alien speaking, Mr. A, has a concern for the humans to wake up. You know, with all the monuments all over the earth that can't be built today, it should be acknowledged by all of us that there was obviously some advanced population on planet Earth, whether visitors from space or residents on Earth all along, that could do more than what we can do today, had higher and greater technologies than we have today. And apparently some of our world leaders have been negotiating, according to some books and other information I have, with these aliens for high technologies, and keeping all that information from the citizens of the planet, and actually thinking that the citizens of the planet are more or less animals and not needed, and an annoyance. Look at what they're doing to the homeless people right now, making it illegal to feed them and rounding them up, and they're disappearing. And the homelessness is increasing. It could be any one of us at any time if you can't pay your rent or your mortgage or all your bills. Who's going to allow any of us to stay in a house for free? Electricity for free? Food for free? The great hand of the government is coming down on everybody with the police powers, and they're trying to cause some gigantic paradigm shift of a new world order and new age. And I'm reading here what the alien says. Peace restored in this our home planet, saved from prophesied end. It all connects. This series, Freemasonry and Satanism. Okay, UFOs against the sun. Over a long period of years, astronomers kept seeing objects of planetary shape and apparently planetary size crossing the disk of the sun. These were almost universally assumed to be intramercurial planets. Somehow, it never occurred to anyone that similar crossings of the moon, also seen occasionally, could be related, nor that such objects between the Earth and the moon could undermine the intramercurial planet hypothesis. The alien says relativity will explain by man. Alright, moving on. The alien highlighted some of Jessup's writing. From the earliest days of organized astronomical observation, there have been these sightings of round and spindle-shaped bodies crossing the disk of the sun. Some of these observations disclosed objects so discordant with the established framework of the solar system that science considered them anomalous and often denied the validity of the observations in the mental balance of the observer. And if this was only one or two or even a dozen incidences that were reported in newspapers and by reputable people, I'd be prepared to dismiss it. But, I've got quite a few pages to go here. Stuff was reported by many people throughout the years. Made it to newspapers, made it to magazines. A lot of controversy, a lot of educational colleges and institutions, universities would discredit people who reported what they saw. All right, moving on. The alien highlighted this, what Jessup says. We have changed our conception, and now we can accept these objects as being close to Earth. The overwhelming mass of evidence is too great to brush aside, and proves that astronomy has been sighting UFOs in space. The alien says, so has, question mark, question mark, question mark, but they deny it. Will always so, they too. So again, in this series, why am I talking about UFOs, aliens, and stuff like that, and building in New York and London the Temple of Baal, which matches the columns in the Freemasonic New Age magazine. Because all these people from the Freemasons, Skull and Bones, Illuminati, banksters, Zionist Jewish folks, Jesuits of the Vaticans, and other elitists who are in control of our world have discovered many things that they are not sharing with us. So it might just behoove us to start doing a little research and put two and two together. During the eclipse of September 7th, 1820, crowds in the streets of Eburn saw great numbers of objects in the sky moving in straight lines, counter-marching and turning, all separated by uniform spaces. 5 identified bodies of appreciable size were seen by astronomer Gruthinson. 2 unknown dark bodies were seen by... Phone rang. 2 unknown bodies were seen by Pastoff on October 23, 1822, Webb saw an unknown thing near Venus, March 22, 1823. Many more unknowns were reported in 1823. The alien says, home ships, scout ships, and lifeboat. Continuing on, page 166, Morris Jessup says, Spora saw one crossing the sun, August 20th, 1863. Two star-like objects were seen crossing the sun by Carrington on September 1859. Several examples are reported in Webb's celestial objects, particularly on the dates of July 31st, 1826 to May 30th, 1828. Jean Nicky saw an object, unknown object, against the sun on May 30th, 1853. The unknown planetary object seen by several people in London, described in Nature magazine, has never been explained. In the summer of 1860, R. Covington saw, without optical aid, an object crossing the sun. So here we are, through the years, professional observers are reporting gigantic objects crossing in front of the sun that you could look up and see. Big black spot. On June 6, 1761, Schouten was watching a transit of Venus and saw an object as round, black, and distinct as Venus, but about one-half its size, moving for 3 hours across the sun. It is most likely that it was very close to Earth's surface, so displaced by parallax that it was silhouetted against the bright disk only in that one location. So just imagine a gigantic mothership hovering in Earth's orbit and getting between the observer and the sun. And this is what you would see, like between me, the camera, and my face. You'd see something like this. The alien says, great arcs advance, home ship bringing news and orders for preparation of its arrival. Wow, so we got these great arcs arriving on Earth. And I have many more books on UFOs and historical data that we've gone over, and I will go over again in the future. Remember, my point is, it has been these elitist Illuminati, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Skull and Bones type organizations, Zionist, all apparently pagan Jesuits worshiping some kind of sun god, which is basically the pagan religion of the ancient Egyptians, Sumerians, etc. And they're keeping all this information from we the people. And preparing for some kind of big calamity on Earth, huge destruction, and economic chaos, and a world revolution. So when you watch some of those videos on YouTube or magazine articles and all this, just remembering some of the stuff in this book ought to be beneficial. It is most likely that it was very close to Earth's surface, and so displaced by parallax that it was silhouetted against the bright disk only in that one location. And again, the alien says, great arcs advance home ship bringing news and orders of preparation of its arrival. Jessup says, all this leads to a showdown on the intramercurial planet Mercury planet question, since it has been shown by C.H.F. Peters and others that there are no intramercurial planets, then what are these things? So the closest planet to the sun is Mercury. And sometimes when they saw the big black circular or other shaped objects passing in front of the sun, they thought there might be another planet closer. But apparently they're proven that's not the case. So then what are they, as Jessup says? We have difficulty in rejecting the statement of experienced observers like Standisher of Newburgh, who saw on February 1762 a round black spot on the sun. On November 19, 1762, observer Lichtenberg saw with the unaided eye a very large round spot, 1/12 the diameter of the sun, traverse a chord of 70 degrees in approximately 3 hours, crossing across the sun, while he's looking up at the sun. Again, I'm not reading everything, as you can see here, so moving around. Again, it seems unlikely that a thing so large would penetrate the Earth-Moon system without causing some noticeable disturbance, or so again. The alien says again, the return of the great ark. So they have all this stuff, fear-mongering or news coming out, Palladians, Planet X, Nibiru. And you keep all that in the back of your mind and you start reading this, the return of the great ark. What are we dealing with in this reality? And what do these elitists who control our planet, who apparently were responsible for 9/11 and so much more, World War I, World War II, all as said by the Freemasons' leader, Albert Pike, in 1880-something, interesting period of time, that these things were happening back when he was alive, when he wrote Morals and Dogma, in which he was communicating with some masters to write Morals and Dogma, and Helena Blavatsky writing The Secret Doctrine, which she was in communication with masters. You see the connection? And then you got these so-called great arcs and aliens returning to Earth, and preparations for a new world order and a new age. Are these demonic beings the ones mentioned in the Bible? Is that a fair question? Why are they putting the Temple of Baal in New York and London this month, April 2016, which is a demonic god? And why are the same columns on the Freemason magazines called the New Age? Why are these same columns on our courthouses and monuments all over the planet? And why are these buildings called temples, Freemason buildings, and Jewish churches are called temples? So there are secrets that are being kept from us. Continuing on here, between the 1st and 5th of May, 1764, Hoffman saw with the naked eye a large round spot, 1/5 the diameter of the sun, traverse it slowly from north to south. That is a direction of motion almost unheard of in the solar system. So it wasn't going around in an elliptic orbit around the sun like all the planets do. It was going around from north to south, so obviously seemingly intelligent control. That is the direction of motion almost unheard of in the solar system, except perhaps for a few maverick comets. It looks like controlled motion. The size is comparable of that of the Lichtenberg object, and the difference is no greater than would be apparent with an object between Earth and the Moon shifting its position with the changing location of gravitational neutral. The alien says, Great Arcs Grand Tour. So when these great arcs arrived, did they have a grand tour of our solar system? You could just see them looking out the window going, there's planet Earth. There's too many people on it, so we're going to depopulate it. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to control all their politicians and leaders and promise them a wealthy living and survival if they help us destroy all their fellow men. I'm just theorizing here, reading this stuff, knowing what these Freemasons and people promoting the satanic Luciferian religion, putting the Temple of Baal in New York and London, and so much more. CERN, things I've talked about, with the 666 in the logo, and Shiva, the goddess of destruction, statue out front. And recently, I guess last month, they had a Shiva festival. What is going on? And not too long ago, they had a gigantic goat projected onto the Hoover Dam. Shiva and the goddess Kali, demon goddesses, were projected onto the Empire State Building. And don't forget 911 and Building 7, which wasn't hit by a plane, free-falling through controlled demolition, obviously, which enabled them to go in the Middle East, get the citizens' approval, because the citizens believed what the government told them. So then the government could overthrow all the governments and mass murder millions of people over there, and then start evicting them, relocating them to Europe and the United States. Are these beings coming with these great arcs? Do they want to relocate into the Middle East? Are they reptilian and need cold-blooded creatures who don't like cold weather, like snakes? In the Garden of Eden, the snake. So they need to be in this hot desert. Theorizing again, thinking. On June 17, 1777, Messier cataloger of Nubili and star clusters, Nubila, saw a number of little bodies crossing the sun very rapidly. So not just one big body crossing the sun, a bunch of little bodies crossing the sun. Got this little Easter egg here for my demonstration. Very rapidly, in parallel directions, D'Anglos of Tarbes, France, saw a slightly elliptical, sharply defined spot on the sun about halfway between the edge and center, which took about 25 minutes to pass off the disk. So you had this thing go past this part of the sun that took 25 minutes to cross the sun. The alien says, as you can see here, I don't want to let you think I'm making this up. That's why I do book reviews when my finger is here. Great arc. Are we to believe this stuff? Jessup says, on October 10th, 1802, at Magdeburg, Finch saw a spot moving 2 minutes of arc in 4 minutes of time across the sun, and not seen again after a cloudy spell. Near the sun, e.g. in a deep intramercurial orbit, this indicates a velocity of 15,000 to 20,000 miles per minute. Per minute. January 6, 1818. Two Englishmen, Capo Loft and Mr. Acton, saw a small sub-elliptical, opaque spot moving more rapidly over the sun than Venus moves when in transit. Guteson saw two bodies cross the sun together on July 26, 1819. So these are all reported incidences, and Morris Jessup, the astronomer, professor, spent years researching this stuff to write his book, A Case for UFOs, whom some aliens or beings edited, and so the Navy had it reprinted, called it the Vera edition of Jessup's book, and it included the Allende letters that somebody was writing to Jessup, who was speculating and saying, you know, the Philadelphia experiment was interesting, and Einstein's theory of relativity should be further investigated so we can figure out this anti-gravity technology. And Allende, who wrote Morris Jessup, scolded him for that, saying humans can't handle that technology. Moving on. A circular, well-defined spot with a circular atmosphere and orange-gold tint It crossed the sun in about 5 hours, February 12, 1880. The American Journal of Science discusses reports by Pastoff for the years 1834, 1836, and 1837, wherein he reports having seen bodies crossing the sun's disk in comparatively short spaces of time. There is a description of a large object and an accompanying much smaller one, changing position relative to each other and taking different courses. The alien says, one who doesn't realize the galactic molecular scope of Einstein's unified field theory, 1922 to 1927. Back to Jessup's description, his researched description. Moving across the sun repeatedly in what seemed to be a directed movement. Moving on here, a very small, perfectly round spot without a trace of penumbra was seen to cross a considerable portion of the sun's disk in a short space of 6 hours, as observed and reported July 12, 1837, by De Vico of Rome, at Rome. Moving on here, in October 2, 1839, Dr. Kupis, an astronomical pupil at the college in Rome, saw a perfectly clear, round and definite spot moving at such a rate that it would cross the sun in about 6 hours. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the sun, and I need to probably get some kind of example to show this. But the sun, one example I'll give you, is just see this picture from here where my finger is here, all the way over to here, down to here, and up to here. In other words, the whole picture right here would be the sun, and this would be the earth way back here. That's the difference in size. This would be the earth, and this whole picture here would be the sun. That's the relative description of the size. Look it up. Check it out. So when some object, when the earth is back here, and this is all the sun, and from earth, somebody sees an object like this crossing the face of the sun, that's a lot of distance to travel, is what I'm trying to say. The sun is huge. All right. Moving on. In late June and early July 1847, Scott and Rye saw a spot like Mercury in transit. On October 11, 1847, Schmidt at Bonn saw a small black body pass rapidly over the sun. Now remember, these people are professional or amateur astronomers. And they reported these things in magazines and periodicals and newspapers. And this is what Morris Jessup researched to write his book, The Case for UFOs. Honest, decent research about things that were reported over those hundreds of years. And then we see things that are exclaimed to be going on now. And I don't know about anybody else, but I'd like to know the truth. Moving on here, he saw a similar object on October 14th, 1849. March 12th, 1849, Low and Sidebotham watched for half an hour a small round black spot traversing the sun. On June 11th, 1855, Ritter and Schmidt near Naples watched just before sunset with the naked eye a black body crossing the sun's disk. Now it could be high up in Earth's orbit, a gigantic ship miles wide would look like something, a black spot crossing the sun. What was it? September 12th, 1857, Wadesbeck, Oort saw a remarkable round spot near the north border of the edge of the sun at 1 p.m. 1859, Dr. Lescambart, an amateur astronomer at Origis, France, announced that he had observed the passage of a body of planetary size across the sun March 26th. So, you know, it all depends where the object is. If you're on Earth and it's close to Earth, like when you look up and see a plane, and a plane looks about this big. And if it were crossing over your head between you and the sun, in Earth's orbit, it would look like a little black dot. Now, if it were gigantic and it was past Earth's orbit, closer to the sun, and it was planet size, it would literally be blocking out the sun, like this egg is blocking out my face. Just relative to think, where would it have to be in Earth's orbit? Maybe as far as the moon, maybe further, maybe close to the sun. And if you had a telescope? These people were professionals. I don't think they were all fooled. So they're given some accurate reports on incidences that happened. And I think it might behoove us to keep this in the back of our mind when we're paying attention to this New Age, New World Order stuff, propaganda, world threats, economic destruction, Agenda 21, and all this other craziness we're experiencing right now. The dollar crashing, a one world currency, the Pope calling for a one world religion, and all the satanic, luciferic symbolism on Grammys, football halftime shows, American Idol football, the all-seeing eye zooming up and zooming back, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, Temple of Baal in New York and London, and so much more. The murder and mayhem in the Middle East, homeless people disappearing, FEMA camps stocking up. Maybe they're filling them up with people. Something is planned, and biblically speaking, apparently if you don't take the mark of the beast on your hand or your forehead, swear allegiance to Lucifer, they want to behead you. What's that got to do with these aliens? Does it have anything to do with these aliens? Are there friendly aliens and faux aliens, evil aliens? Are they reptilian? Do they have to live in the Middle East because it's hot? And what do they have planned for the rest of us? That apparently, according to the Zionist Jewish folks, they call us goyim, which means cattle. The Masons, Freemasons, and all those other Mystery School of Babylon occult groups call us profane. And H.G. Wells calls us animals not to be trusted. So let me read on here. Were these reputable astronomers deluded, mendicious, and irresponsible? They were all highly intelligent people, educated and trained in the fields of astronomy and mathematics. The alien says, they will never alert the whole world again. It would interfere with the petty squabbles between nations and cause a common bond of brotherhood of man, sort of kinship to be realized. These humans love to impose their will, to make war too well. So this is what these entities, whoever was commenting on Morris Jessup's book, said about we the people. I think we the people would be in generally good condition worldwide if it weren't for the elitist kings and queens and other people like Caesars and Hitlers and pharaohs and Kabbalah, witchcraft, Illuminati, Freemasons, Bohemian Grove, Bilderberger people, Council of Foreign Relation, Trilateral Commission, and so many more organizations, all keeping secrets and plotting against we the people, poisoning us, killing us, and robbing us. My opinion, from my research, of hundreds of hours of videos I've made, hundreds of books I've read, magazines, videos I've watched, press releases I printed out, which, by the way, in the mainstream media right now, The press releases are equaling the alternate media right now in bizarreness. It's all bizarre. It's all strange. I mean, it's mainstream media. New York Times and I forget the other newspaper, the Journal, that they're posting the information about the building the Temple of Baal in New York City and having an opening grand celebration. To the devil! Main Street News. March 20th, 1862, a sharply defined round spot was watched in its progress across the sun for about 20 minutes by Loomis of Manchester. On February 12th, 1864, a spot 8 seconds in arch. If you have a compass, you open it up for 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, 90 degrees. So 8 seconds of arch in diameter across the sun at a rate between that of Mercury and Venus. On May 6, 1865, a round black spot moved across the sun, was watched by Crumbre of Constantinople. So all over the world, Morris Jessup was collecting the data for his book. To me, it's valuable information to know that for over the past few hundred years, large bodies have been hovering over Earth. If you've been following me on my this is number 6, part 6. So assuming about 2 hours per video, that's 12 hours of this book of information that I thought was very important. And I can't say that sometimes these videos are the most exciting things to watch. Not with all the animation you see by other people's videos and stuff. But I wanted to do book reviews and show you the stuff here so that you would know where it came from. And it's not Rick here having his opinion. I'm reading this stuff and my commentary, my opinion, which does not have to be your opinion. But back here in these dates, listen to this. There are 7 reported sightings in 1886 of a large body being seen near Venus. So these aircraft are flying near Venus. In 1645, a body large enough to look like a satellite was seen near Venus. And these astronomers would know what they're talking about. Oh. Moving on. A luminous spot was seen in 1799 by Harding and Schroeder moving across the disk of Mercury. The London Times, December 17th, 1883, reports that Mr. Hanks Pasha in Egypt saw through glasses an immense black spot upon the lower part of the sun. According to Science, July 31, 1896, Brooks of Smith Observatory saw a round object pass slowly across the moon. And the alien says, home ship. There can be little doubt but that these objects existed, and that they existed in space. But they are quite commonly seen, between Earth and Moon, and at least once between the Earth and Mercury, and that they appeared as discs or spheres, spindles or dumbbells, the shapes. The alien says, crescents, shackles. 2 reasons for odd shapes. 1, electronic molecular field migration due to coat on center parts of ship drive units. Other, like sundogs, also an infused ship hit by ultra-high polarized wave flames up and often takes these shapes to some extent. Thus you have, in effect, a force field charge overcharging the drive induction part of the ship. This causes heat, cooks the pilot, and flames the ship to cinders if it is not caught soon enough to cut off, shed the overcharge. Alright, next chapter, Location of UFOs. All right, page 173. Anyways, they're talking about new bodies like planets and comets. At the total eclipse of the sun, July 29, 1878, they saw unscheduled, unexplained objects. The alien says, mobilization for building of Cho was seen. Mobilization for building of CHOL was seen. So what were the aliens building that they would call CHOE? All right, page 174. Watson found two disc-like or planetary objects, both red and both comparable in size of Mercury, perhaps a bit smaller. One was 2.5 degrees from the sun, the other between 4 and 5 degrees. Both were to the west. All right, Swift saw two discoid objects also. The alien says, an attitude common even among primitives. I haven't been there or seen such a place or a thing or a person or happening, so I must show a semblance of intellect and doubt this thing until I see it myself. Very common. So a lot of people don't even believe there's a God these days when they see all these New Agers and New One-Worlders with all this satanic rituals. And if you look it up, even having, bringing back, apparently, sacrificing humans. Just saying. Craziness goes on. And the alien continues to say, strangely, no sailor would believe that the world was round, even when seeing its roundness each day, for it was not the proper way to think then. So when the people used to think the world was flat, they would laugh at you. Probably the church would have you burned at the stake if you tried to do blasphemy and say the earth was round. Even the scientists who speculated that and were sharing their theory, they had to be careful of the Vatican. Moving on, the alien says, in the above exampled conflict, it was not who was right or wrong, but who but myself is the best observer, i.e. my pride, my experience, or my ego. When ego slights ego, both become narrow and quite small. We all know with the people who are trying to bring about the New World Order, New Age, they use the divide and conquer technique quite a bit. Between blacks and whites, straights and gays, Arabs and the rest of the world, Mexicans and America, young and old, rich and poor, etc., etc., etc. Divide and conquer. And the people with such small minds, they just bite that hook. They don't think. That's so concerning. If we do have a crisis manufactured in the world today, a nuclear explosion in some harbor, and then the president declares martial law and ceases all cargo ships, container ships, trucks, tractor trailers, the grocery stores will be empty in 2 or 3 days. People will be hungry in about a week and start rioting and killing each other. They don't think. And it'll all have been manufactured. Anyways, moving back to this book, Dr. C.H.F. Peters, Archmaster of Astronomical and Mathematical Analysis, set up the best scientific case for UFOs which has ever been stated. It boils down to this. Watson and Swift did see two disc-like objects. And the alien said so did 30 others. Watson and Swift did see what they said they saw, but they were wrong in thinking they saw planets. So apparently way back then there was a big hoopla about these scientists seeing these things, and nobody could agree that they did or didn't, or what they saw. Nobody wanted to believe it might be gigantic UFOs. Those who have seen the moon in eclipse will remember how red it looks, just one passage of the light through the atmosphere. At various times during the past half-century, there have been suggestions of small satellites circling the Earth very rapidly and close to the surface, 200 to 600 miles away, that is. The New York Times, August 23, 1954. We do feel that observations covering hundreds of years disprove the supposed Russian origin of UFOs and also established controlled and irregular motion as opposed to the regularly of orbital motion like planets and moons. They are never far out of line with the sun. That is why it is so difficult to see them, except at times of eclipse or when they are actually in transit across the sun. The alien says, a variation of the radio telescope, such as in use in England and I believe New Jersey, USA, can detect energy forms of LM ships, plus their solid and semi-solid forms as well, detect nodes too. Next chapter, page 177, UFO Patrol. The years 1879 and 1880 partook of general spiciness of the era of the comets. There was the house whose roof suddenly took its departure on Easter Sunday in 1879. A slate roof. It jumped up and into the air suddenly and then fell back on the ground. So a slate roof just lifted right up into the air and fell on the ground. Anomalies in gravity, gravitational anomalies. On July 10th, 1880, the conservative Scientific America broke its editorial policy of reticence regarding abnormal events and noted that some men were working in a field in Ontario when they saw stones shooting upwards, stones falling upwards, without the aid of whirlwind or any other obvious cause. Something seemed to be disturbing gravity. April 9th, 1879, slag was reported to fall in the city of Chicago. Slag would be like molten lava or burnt up steel. There were many falls of ice in 1879. Some in Richmond, England, was in chunks 5 inches long. Bright spots or lights continued to be seen on the moon from 1879 to 1880, and the disturbances on the surface of Jupiter were so noteworthy as to cause comment in Nature. There were 5 comets visible in 1879 and 6 in 1880, although not all were visible to the naked eye. A green thunderbolt was reported in Scientific America, and we are thereby reminded of the spat of green thunderbolts over New Mexico during the past 3 or 4 years. The Seco-Bonjo meteorite, which fell in Eastern Europe in the quite incredible active year of 1879 to 1880, was a strange and startling new kind of meteorite stone. There were darkness, sun darkening, and abnormal cold winter weather. The Great Red Spot on Jupiter continued to evolve and to maintain its merciless drive around the great globe of that planet. Because of its particular shape and movement, one could almost imagine a great interstellar spaceship landing and floating on Jupiter's surface. Its size makes this a debatable hypothesis. The alien says, would he believe it when he sees it? Moving on with Jessup, there have been several reports of misty, fiery, or cometary objects which exhibited unusual motion. For the past 10 years, it seems, this Nibiru issue, Planet X, called the Destroyer, seems to have been having strange movements, as reported by numerous observers. Is it all under some kind of demonic alien control? Only now are we awakening to the possibility that such erratic movement may slightly signify direction and control by intelligence. One of the most outstanding examples of erratic celestial movement was that noted by observer Henry Harrison of New Jersey, Jersey City, on the night of April 12th and 13th, 1879. Getting no response from the font of authority, Harrison reported his discovery to the New York Tribune in a letter, and this was reproduced in the Scientific American, May 10th, 1879. So as a scientist, he recorded the motions in terms understandable to astronomers, as you can see. And it just didn't follow in line like a comet. It was erratic, like it was controlling where it was going. He comments on the irregularity of the motion. And unless we deny the veracity of Dovey, Harrison, and Parkhurst, and impugn their intelligence as observers, or both, there cannot possibly be any argument against manipulated objects of the misty and ethereal types in space. The alien says, so-called ethereal types are the old force shield cooking full blast, made good protection. So apparently they have some kind of an electromagnetic force field shield that goes around the craft, and maybe it also helps it to be a anti-gravity device. Moving on, we are vaguely reminded of some of the shapes of pyramids, bells, pears, etc., which have been reported for generations. Its appearance alone indicates that it was a UFO. Its motion clinches the argument. This is the most important revolutionary telescope observation ever published, especially if we place a high value on discovering and contacting a new racial intelligence. The alien says, yeah, well, nobody's interested. So again, what do the powers that be know that they're not sharing with us, specifically concerning the Freemasons and Satanism, which includes, of course, witchcraft, Illuminati, Zionist Jesuits, and all the other goings-on on this planet of these thugs, mafia types, working towards a new world order and new age, and trying to persecute and possibly prosecute people who want to talk about Jesus or God, and bring us the decadent New Age, marriage, pansexual, transgender, pedophilia, homosexual, and all that other craziness, trying to make it like it's normal. And I don't hate these people. It never really became an issue until about 10 years ago when the government started the propaganda campaigns coming out of the United Nations vying for this new age and new world order. So it said here, it was moving straight eastward, which except at the equator is impossible for uncontrolled motion, so it was directed. The alien says, so what? Jessup says, but then it suddenly changed from one declination to another, an impossible maneuver for an uncontrolled body. So if it was a comet, it would just keep on going like this. But this device did something like this and started going another way. Had to be controlled. The alien says, catch one of them, a magnetic net will do. Magnetic deadfall, cut out field. Controller would be considered a crackpot idea even if he is. The only chance to catch one must cut off mag field intake to do so. You can get the book and get all the details here. I'm reading only my highlighted portions. Moving on here. The Wanderer was indeed close to New York City from Devo's rough description of the size of the object, would have been about a half a mile in diameter at an altitude of 8 to 100 miles. Jessup says, we do not know how many of the things there are near the Earth, so why not start a UFO searching campaign among a coalition of UFO enthusiasts, amateur astronomers, and radio hams? So you remember when Jessup wrote his book was probably in the late 1960s. Now you go on MUFON or other UFO recording websites on the internet, and if you pay attention to the descriptions, that's where I find it fascinating. Because I don't care if it's from California to Maine or Florida or England or Brazil. There seems to be a common denominator in the descriptions. So I can't believe everybody's making it up. Dr. Bones' crude observation of a discoid object was the greatest importance in confirming Dr. Gould's discovery in 1882. There are apparently two classes of dirigible UFOs to look for. One is the planetary, disc-like things near the sun and moon by Watson and Swift, and the other is the cometary type as seen by Harrison. So some of these UFOs actually look like a comet. Some of them with the tail in the front. Some kind of thruster device, you think? I do not believe that large numbers of cometary UFOs will be found, although I am not sure. Observers near large centers of populations, atom plants, and industrial sites will probably have the most success. But while the number of expected objects is small, the searching is easier than for disk. So they got these UFOs that come near the population centers, nuclear power plants, and industrial sites that look like little comets. Glowing orbs, white ones, red ones, orange ones. I've seen the orange ones. I've showed pictures of them. I took pictures of numerous orbs coming over the horizon. Then when they got over my house or whatever, they seemed to shoot off up into space. Let us set up dozens of observational stations with telescopes, and let us man them with at least one saucer specialist, and let us add some radar observers. So back then, Morris Jessup was recommending that we organize some kind of observational corps. The alien says, will never be permitted by our government to a purely civilian setup and know-how. Here you go again. So this guy who's making this note mentions it as our government. That would be Mr. B. And the government will never allow this. So again, what do they know and what are their plans for us? What do they think of us when they are apparently sky spraying chemicals in the sky, controlling the weather warfare, causing drought all over the planet? Look it up on the internet. Causing a lot of destruction and suffering all over the planet with that sky spraying. And HARP systems can control the jet stream. So it seems like whoever is in charge is not doing stuff that's good for we the people. Just the opposite. Jessup says, in this way, we can track these erratic things to their source, be it in the upper atmosphere, the moon, the gravitational neutral, or what have you. The UFO's problem can be solved despite the curtain of secrecy by coordinated effort. If an observation station in, say, Philadelphia discovered a fast mover, they could alert observers in Baltimore, Harrisburg, and New Jersey City. And a quick triangulation would tell just how far out the interloper was, how big, and its speed. The alien says, it would do little good, even if a colony were openly established in the U.S. land, for, though, man would thusly reach the stars, they would feel the little men to be such children, that they, i.e. man, would think the gift of space light to be much, much more important than the philosophy by which LMs live in, with and over these mind-wrecking conditions that space and sea contain, and yet they live with these things so very happily. The only thing bad about such a colony is the fact that little men do not remember to always remain invisible. When embarrassed, they go pop, and thus they hide. Reason, repeated field ship state gives LMs this ability. So apparently when they're in these spaceships with these force fields that enables these ships to be anti-gravitational, and I guess travel at great speeds and probably even be invisible. For some reason, like with the Philadelphia experiment, if you followed all the videos on this book, after the ship reappeared, some of the crew members, out of nowhere, at home or out on the street, would just pop and disappear from this reality, and some of them would burst into flames. Spontaneous combustion. So they're saying here these short aliens that look like children in size seem to have obtained this ability to go into stasis, as I'm learning what the terms are with this book, into this interdimensional state, pop in and out of it. Because they're in ships that are popping in and out of it, it gives these entities the ability to do that. And they're the size of small children, so they're thinking that if they did have to interact with mankind, mankind would probably treat them like children because they're small like children. This ability, thus now you see the overall wisdom of Einstein's retraction of his unified field theory, because he didn't want mankind to have it. Look what they're doing with the nukes right now and all the other weaponry, hollow point bullets and everything else. They seem to have been acquiring 450 million hollow points bullets purchased by the USA government. What insane government, police, CIA, whoever they are, military, would use hollow point bullets on we the people? There's something mentally wrong with these people running our world. The U.S. Navy ship invisibility experiments, that would be Philadelphia experiment. This is the alien speaking here, 1943. Results of such uninformed tinkering seems to show the correctness of his reason for retraction. So with these experiments, like the Philadelphia experiment with the microwave transmitters all around the ship, turning them on and the ship disappearing, moving in time when it reappeared, some of the crew members were half in and half out of the bulkhead. And even the after effects, the people would be at home, the man with his family, and all of a sudden be walking across the room right through the wall and disappearing and never to be seen again. Some of them bursting into flames. Some of them disappearing with a group of people standing around them, just out of this existence. Because they were involved in that Philadelphia experiment, maybe. Colonel Marwick, amateur in South Africa, saw an object near the moon on September 27th, 1881. Not the concentration of these of 1881, like a comet but moving very rapidly. On August 28th, 1883, Captain Noble saw something like a comet, new and glorious. On the nights of September 11th and the 13th, 1883, Professor Swift of Rochester saw an unknown object like a comet, and something was seen in Puerto Rico and about the same time in Ohio. Moving on here, page 185. Mr. Morris says, Morris Jessup, but while the solid mass of water of unknown origin was drowning St. Kitts, that's an island, masses of water were deluging the island of Grenada, 300 miles away. So they had these deluges of water, which were not a rainstorm, even a heavy rainstorm, but as if somebody had just taken a whole gigantic ship full of water and dumped it all out. In the island of Dominica, masses of water broke windows and roofs. Mud fell in tons. Even mud was falling from the sky. Gravitational anomaly. Alien spaceship filling up a hole, cargo hold full of water, and which acquired some mud too and fishes, and decided maybe they had too much mud in the water and just dumped it out over wherever they were. Other nations and islands were hit by masses of water. Colombia, Salvador were among them. Beginning on October 10th and continuing until the catastrophe of St. Kitts, there was a deluge after deluge on the earth. In one zone of latitude, the North Tropical area, it seems that a swarm of meteoric lakes must have gotten in the way of a rotating earth. To most of us, such a thing could not be, but it did happen. And it is doubtful if meteorologists have ever assembled all the data on that series of floods. So at one particular latitude around the planet, just came a steady stream of mud and water. Some strange gravitational anomaly. They just lifted it up off the ground like that roof or those rocks. And then when it got so high, it just returned back to the gravitational forces and started falling. To most of us, such a thing just could not be. But it did happen. And it is doubtful that meteorologists have ever assembled all the data. Maybe it was not as general as the worldwide deluge in 1913. So there was a worldwide deluge in 1913, but it was bad enough. And its very concentration was limited. Belt of terrestrial surface is sufficient for us to conclude that extraterrestrial forces and materials were involved. On May 15, 1879, Commander Pringle of HMS Vulture saw luminous waves of pulsating water. They were under the surface, not above it, and passed beneath his ship. The appearance of that of a revolving wheel of light with illuminated or luminous spokes. In fact, there were two wheels, one on each side of the ship, and the phenomenon lasted more than half an hour. There have been several reports, and most of them come from Oriental waters. The alien says, Mandinda, deep project still in the building. So under the ocean, they were apparently building some city or something. They will never finish that city. Chomligi has not enough force to finish it. It's planned growth, but location good. That's what the alien said. Jessup says, about this time, an enormous number of luminous bodies were seen to rise from the horizon in Germany. A carbonous mass of brown coal fell from the sky in Argentina. The red, blue, gray hailstones fell in 1880. An object of quartz-like was reported to fall at Sequoia Lake, New York. Rico Palmero Observatory saw long parallel lines of bodies crossing the sun. The wheels of light in the sea were seen again on May and June 1880. Reported from the Moor or One vessel at sea. The three lights moving in the ravine at St. Petersburg were seen on July 30th, 1880. Luminous phenomenon continued to appear on the moon throughout 1879-1880, including one luminous line cable or wall which was seen January 23, definitely dividing in half very brilliant interior of a prominent lunar crater. Activity on the moon. A dead sea serpent was found at sea in the early 1880, and sailors danced on the upturned belly. Something similar to a turtle 60 feet long and 40 feet wide was reported in the New Zealand Times in December 1883, and there were several reports of huge marine animals during the comet years. The alien says, if so-called sea monster or serpent was an LM ship, it is still there undersea. If SMs neutralized it, the LMs will not have come back or called for it in SM territory. So they found some gigantic thing that was like an upside-down turtle, and apparently it was one of the alien ships. The flying machine over Louisville, Kentucky was of 1880 vintage, and also a thing changing shape over Madisonville, Kentucky. The British trading ship Atlanta, bound for Bermuda, was lost in 1880, without a trace in that region, so well known today in the area of the missing planes and ships. There was an invasion of insects, flies, in 1880. Clouds of them, millions and millions, appeared over Harvey, France, as though from the Atlantic. On August 21, they blackened the air and seemed exhausted when they fell. The same day, a cloud of long black flies, so large that it took 20 minutes to pass, blackened the sky over Nova Scotia. Another cloud on September 1st, east or west, they seemed to come from the mysterious Atlantic. According to the New York Times, a woman was killed in 1880 in a closed room which nobody had entered. Explanations that she had been killed by lightning, but bedposts were chopped off as if by a hatchet. There seems almost always to be poltergeist activity in England, but as an especially turbulent case broke out in October 1880. And if you've been watching my videos, then you are aware that I think that the poltergeist, psychic, demonic, things in the Bible, this stuff, kind of stuff I'm reading here, I think it's all connected. There are not two realities. There's one reality. Everything's in that reality. We just have to open up our minds and understand it. And understand we have malevolent, demonic, insane forces controlling our planet. Look what they're doing in the Middle East. Bombing all those buildings in all those countries. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Egypt, everywhere. And a lot of people here in the U.S. will just ignore it, or laugh about it, or say they deserve it, not realizing that it is murder and it's wrong. And if we allow it to continue or happen there, you can bet it's going to happen here. The culprits are not going to stop. They realize they can do whatever they want to do, and generally speaking, most of the population won't utter a word of complaint. The year 1880 was in the midst of what we have chosen to call the years of the comets. There were 6 comets in the skies of 1880. But such activity cannot in any way account for the very bright, very spectacular comets of 1880, 1882, with their attendant phenomenon, many of which can collectively be described as abnormal. One had 2 tails, one aft and one forward, and appeared to have nuclei exhibiting independent motion with the head of the comet. So here are just some of the numbers and data statistics of the reported cases. And again, to reiterate my opinion, we know that they're saying some kind of crazy things are happening now. Well, so what? It's been happening for 100, 200 years and even further back. Thousands of years documented strange historic monuments all over the planet. Caves with etchings and drawings and pyramids and stones and anomalies all over the world, apparently built before the Great Flood. So once we recognize that the things that they're using to fearmonger us now with the propaganda, there's been these anomalies all along, we need to start asking questions. The powers that be know that these anomalies, strange happenings and sightings and paranormal, poltergeist, whatever, entities, beings that were sighted or captured, or Roswell aircraft, or all this stuff. The powers that be know all about this stuff. They've documented it all, but they don't share it with the public. Why? Page 188. Like Harrison's object, this was further north than usual, for a comet or quite far from the sun. If a comet, it should have manifest motion in an hour. The fact that it did not, yet moved away later, is indicative of controlled motion. So you got this comet, it just decides to stop and park there and then take off. Its stationary positions suggest hovering. For instance, in the monthly notices of December 1880, W.F. Denning describes a very slow meteor which took 15 to 20 seconds to cross the sky. Well, if you've ever seen a comet, you know it crosses the sky like that. It doesn't go like this. 15 to 20 seconds. So it wasn't a comet. And mentions a stationary meteor which seemed to be approaching the observer in sinuous track. There are many references to unusual meteors during these years. There are hundreds of drawings showing meteor trains, explosions, zigzag paths, and erratic movements. One man and his family were deluged by a wave of water. They said the wave was 15 feet high and was icy cold. This was in Missouri, April 18th, 1880. And stones weighing several hundred pounds were lifted from the ground and carried some distance. There is an accredited statement that a stone weighing 2 tons fell in this storm into a field belonging to Mr. S. Rose, but it was impossible to determine whence it came. So how do you get a 2-ton stone falling in your field? I'm certain the wind doesn't pick up a 2-ton stone. Even a rushing tidal wave wouldn't pick and carry a 2-ton stone. Alright, these 6 UFOs were seen and drawn by the astronomer Bernard, October 14th, 1882, and were only 6 degrees from the head of the Great Comet of 1882. They were accompanied by a spindle-shaped object looking like mothership, only a few degrees away. This comet had a tail which preceded it, and a complicated head which contained moving parts. Schmidt of Athens saw a number of these nebulous UFOs move away from the comet into space. So you got a comet in space, and apparently the UFO ships, I guess, piggybacked its space area and were going in the direction it was going, and decided at some point to detach itself from the comet. What did the aliens say? Why 1880? What wind velocity could ever lift a 2-ton stone? I just said that. Off a hilltop and maintain it in the air until it was carried to that spot. How far was the nearest hill? where such a stone could be found at all. The above question will never be asked, and so will never be answered if asked. No one would want to tell the truth, lest he be led away to the funny farm, or etc. of the like. The case is proved B and Jemmy. Alright, moving on here to the next page, 191. Dr. Gould would have to have taken Dr. Peters' attitude if he were to handed the very report that his professional integrity demanded, that he sent to Astro Neurichin and to the observer, Mr. Fillery, wouldn't he? So apparently they were debating this sighting, and of course the people in government who are working for the universities don't want to admit or discuss strange things for fear of ruining their career, and censorship by the government officials. Page 195. The apparent movement of the object, quite rapid as seen by both observers. The object maintains its position between Earth and Sun, as seen from the Earth. Thus, if our analysis and reasoning are even partially correct, proves intelligence control of space navigation. The alien says, he proves this too, many times not. Thus, who would ever believe him here? So that's why I read all these books and share the information. I think if we keep getting enough of it, a different book, a different author, a different time frame, a different subject, that we can get these connecting the dots of the common denominators and maybe come up with some rational explanation for this activities hundreds of years ago, 100 years ago, and stuff going on today. And the planned World War III, with the government spending, like the USA, $450 billion a year. If even $2 billion were divided amongst we the people, we could all buy ourselves a home. What is this insanity? Why are they preparing to have a worldwide battle? Who are these people who control our planet? That's the question. Why do they want to destroy us and themselves? Is it just a game to them? Do they hate humanity, as is said in the Bible about demonic and satanic forces? It becomes not incomprehensible that the object was maintaining itself at the neutral. Alright, moving on. So they're having this debate about this explanation of this sighting. And they got these pictures of different drawings of the thing in space that was seen, and then the object next to it, as you can see. And the alien says, obviously the ship was in distress, or under attack. Else it would not have been using so much power, thus going so slowly and glowing so fiercely. Oh yes, was the LM inspection ship in distressful truce of above? The more of the aliens comment. S ship force shield going full power for protection. Jessup says, little wonder remains that all astronomers were puzzled by this thing, or series of things, for such proximity to the Earth was unthought of in those days, and is unrecognized and unspoken today. The alien says, who dares panic a world so intent on showing off its morals compared to other nations? Such revelation of fact extent would make all mankind brothers, bound by need to one another's resources to observe and fight the S-men. Would that be the satanic men? Reptilians, maybe? Page 198, we're almost done here. No one thus far has suggested that these lights and great tails might offer a means signaling over distances of a few billions of miles to the red spot of Jupiter, for instance. The alien says, force shield going full power, warding off the occasional onslaughts of fast-moving space junk. When operating, SO gives off cold light, and it flashes up when it has been hit by silica, Corb space debris. Page 199. Could all these astronomers, professionals, and competent amateurs have conceived of a body being so close to the Earth, yet moving slowly, maybe within our atmosphere? They would have realized that they had a new and awesome problem on their hands, perhaps the key to many celestial enigmas. Jessup says that, and the alien highlighted it. So here I am closing in on 2 hours of sighting after sighting after sighting after sighting and description, different parts of the world. Can they all be lying? By professionals, astronomers, and scientists, and other people. It may even be that these were the selfsame two objects seen by Watson and Swift. It may be that they are two objects sought today by Army Ordnance and Dr. La Paz. It may be that today's amateurs can find them if they will look towards the sun. The alien says, one was S and the other LM. As the Pipole's historian, I must say neither harmed the other, for that was during the times of truce and inspection, the results of which we all know. Hapaz is harmless. That was what the alien said. In any case, we have recorded verified proof, when properly analyzed, of the existence and locations of UFOs. Inherent in this proof, too, is conclusive evidence that intelligence and control exist in the UFOs. All right, winding this down here. 2 more pages. The British ship Ellen Austin in mid-Atlantic encountered an abandoned derelict in perfectly seaworthy condition. A salvage crew was put aboard the strange wanderer with instructions to make for St. John's, Newfoundland, where Ellen Austin herself was bound. The 2 ships then parted company in foggy weather, but a few days later they met again. Like their unknown predecessors, the salvage crew had vanished forever without a trace. So one ship finds another ship in perfect condition with all its cargo, but no crew. So they put a crew aboard and they head for the same place. It gets foggy so they can't see each other. When they do see each other, the ship that was abandoned is abandoned again. Where did the people go? Like their unknown predecessors, the salvage crew had vanished forever without a trace. The Case for the UFO, a note on sources. So Jessup's going to make some commentary so we can end this video. Such material is of vast extent, and to merely list it here would be impossible. So this is just a tiny tidbit of the information when he did his research. In addition, nobody knows the real extent of material related to space life and space activity. For it appears in a multitude of very diverse publications. In most of the records, the persons noting observations did not recognize the basic causes. For instance, when we look for data about activity on the moon, we find it, and I'm just going to show you this, in all these different sources of documents. All these documents, periodicals, magazines, sightings and weird things sighted on the moon. Not to speak of the innumerable serial publications of various universities, observatories, and many popular treatises, such as Proctor's Astronomy and Webb's celestial objects. So Jessup's admitting he's only researched one tiny little source for all this material, and there's just thousands of other sources and other time periods. We're just poking around the 1880s and a 10-year period. There is absolutely no general rule as to what kind of publication to look in. So anybody who wants to research this, the information is everywhere. The nuggets of information may appear any place at all, including old almanacs. Readers who live in small communities are urged to scan old files of their local papers for news of things falling from the sky. It is altogether possible that if enough persons make searches, we can find more than ample material to prove the case for UFO once and for all. And moving on here on this thing, rural people are much more weather conscious than city folks. So in our quest for records of falling masses of water, we are most anxious to have data from rural records. And like I said, go on MUFON.com or these UFO reporting sites. And the common denominators are indisputable. The descriptions. They're in different categories. All right, here we go with the last 2 pages. This seems like a lot of information from the aliens, so here we go. What happens when a bolt of lightning hits at a point where there is a node, such as a swirl in the magnetic sea or where a magnetic dead spot caused by the neutralization of magnetic sea contra gravity, especially what when the node and bolt both act over bronze inlay? So one of the things from my research that I find kind of fascinating, we've all seen water go down the toilet or the kitchen sink or the bathtub, and it's a little vortex. Spins down in a particular direction, a vortex. We've seen those dust devils, you know, you see out in the sandy field or farm field, and the wind is causing a dust devil, or a tornado, or a water spout. What happens when you get these rotational twisters, which are magnetic forces? A magnetic force that turns into a little twister. What does it do? Can it open up a time portal? The good doctor is far more aware, they're talking about Morris Jessup, the good doctor is far more aware of committing the cardinal effrontery of unorthodoxy than he wishes to show, perhaps, too. He wishes to have more and more and more a flood of data and facts and records of observations that will back up his theory. It would seem much, much more apropos were he not to ask for further proof to show to his fellow professional deriders, but were he to proceed himself into the only field that would convince each and every one of his fellows, that field of gravity and magnetic exploration, as yet untouched. I find that fascinating. They haven't really studied the field of gravity and magnetic exploration, or at least they don't share with we the people what they have discovered. So it's as yet untouched. He then could say the moon is hollow, and not one person would say a word. Approach to morals and ethics of science, not new. Newton proved his theory through observational phenomenon, the which anyone could observe, and so has this man. The other alien says, not to anyone important. The alien goes on to say, would be Mr. B, if the history of the Great War of the ancients were ever recorded, if the history of the Great War of the ancients were ever recorded, except by the black-tongued one's own tales, it would cause man to stand in awe or disbelief that such huge satellite masses were ever deliberately tossed through this atmosphere in an attempt to demolish all the little men. Great works, fortunately, There goes that phone again. All right, moving on here. Great works, fortunately for mankind, mankind's ego, was only a gypsy who will tell another of the catastrophe. And we are a discredited people ages ago. So are the editors of this book gypsies? Do they know some inside secrets? Man wonders where we came from, and I do not believe that they will ever know. These folks on this planet are so engrossed in their puny pettiness and squabbles, that if the great bombardment were to happen again, they would destroy each other in blind panic. Well, their own great book, so they call the Bible the great book, prophesizes that they will surely do so and kick this planet off its orbit, away from its solar system. Even the moon shall not shed her glow. And well, stars following, and the sun going out, or away seemingly, they will blast this jewel into dead space. A good thing that we have learned to not war. The Etrusans no generosity overwhelms. Another alien. My dear brothers, no one single man has dared before to do so much to expose the facts of the matter before us. I say to you that this man fears of the matter before us. I said that fears, and so will not ever go any further than this soapbox. So he's talking about the author of this book, Morris Jessup. So do not concern yourself with him at all. What if I am wrong? Even then I do not be concerned. I say to you, this man is plainly too interested in who shall be wrong, rather than whether his touch upon fundamental principles of force utilization, and is or is not so. Thus he himself all up firmly. When you read some other entities' writing, sometimes it's a little bizarre. In short, he is a small man, too small to lay himself upon the altar of such exploration as would be necessary to prove. Definitely he is correct beyond any doubt. No, he is proud, small, and will only defend his investigations, not that theory at all. As you see, it is plain on the final pages of this his soapbox, even if someone else took up the work he recommends, and enacted by law, it is now already too late, for the Gayorvi are too madly racing to destroy each other. So they call we humans Gayorvi. I know the Jewish people call us Goyim. The Freemasons and other Mystery School of Babylon call us profane, unless you're initiated into the mysteries. And H.G. Wells calls us animals not to be trusted. So right now, with all the weapons the United States and Russia and China and everybody else are buying, Brazil even, France, England, who isn't? Germany, Japan. Looks like they are madly racing to destroy us all, and will very soon do so over a mere parcel or two of sections of the planet, or whoever is right and who is wrong, or from jealousy, envy of the other. They are yet children. These humans show it too clearly. All things stand. They value material things and will not apply themselves to the true value of their own great prophetic book. In principle, yes, but not practice. No Christian nation or diplomat will ever be the true value to another, thus destruction. This man, Jessup, Morris Jessup, is no different. He too is not of a big spirit, enough dal puka. So that was all I'm doing here. It's to the whole entire book. This is part 6, about 2 hours each. Just trying to understand and believe, honestly, sincerely, that there's more going on planet Earth, in space above us, under the Earth likely. Certainly many secret bases all over the planet right now. Pine Gap in Australia. Probably many underground bases and cities all over the world. Look at that one book I went over, Transylvania Sunrise, Peter Moon, and the gigantic underground facility with force fields in Romania. The Gujizi Mountains. And then, of course, there's those underground bases under Area 51 or Dulce or Washington, D.C., Virginia. You can look this stuff on the internet. So I thought I'd end this video with a little look at a couple books. And remembering, as I started this video, the Temple of Baal, B-A-A-L. Apparently in April 2016 it will be erected, some kind of ceremony, in New York and London. Strange enough. You got the 2 columns on the Temple of Baal like the Freemasonic temples. And it is called the Temple of Baal, and the Freemasonic buildings are called Temple. And over there in Israel, in Jerusalem, where they're trying to rebuild King Solomon's temple, who had a magic ring who could call forth demons. So there does seem to be some kind of poltergeist entities that exist. And the Secret Mystery School of Babylon, which includes the Satanic and Luciferian, Isis, Ra, Baal, Moloch worshippers, all-seeing eye Horus, seems to all be connected. Who and what are these creatures? Look at that little humanoid here under the sky. And over here, the Ankh and the snake. So under this guy is the snake, and under this guy is a humanoid. Edgar Cayce, America's greatest psychic, talks about Atlantis. He proved himself over and over, healing people, not even knowing them, just receiving a letter and helping them with ailments their doctors couldn't even do. Then halfway through his lifetime, he started doing life readings, including people who had lived during the Atlantis time. From Atlantis to the New Age. So what's with these crystal skulls? I went over this in one of my book reviews. If you haven't watched the video, please do. But Night Siege, the Hudson Valley, New York State, Connecticut, Western Massachusetts, gigantic pyramidal-shaped UFOs were sighted. And I think it was this book was made in 1987, published. And the reports were 1983 to 1984. Interestingly enough, 100 years from a lot of the descriptions we just saw in Morris Jessup's book. But here were the triangular objects sighted. Here's a little map. All over Connecticut, upstate New York, see those little the interstates. Whole lines of cars were pulled over. Why isn't this common knowledge? And of course you got invisible residents. These some little metal models that were found there in South America. But Ivan Sanderson does a great job of talking about intelligent life under the waters of the earth. So even in the 1600s, 1500s, 1700s, you know, Mayflower type ships, wooden ships, would see UFOs come up out of the water or plunge into the water. And some of them would buzz the ship and break the mast, and when the ship returned to England, they would file an insurance report with Lloyd's of London. Invisible residents. Then you got Raymond Bernard's theory of the hollow earth. I guess the question is the earth a manufactured huge ship, like the ones people see, that are 8,000 miles in diameter or large or whatever? Could the ancients actually do that? Are there openings in the North Pole and the South Pole where apparently whole societies of humans or other beings exist, maybe? I know when I read this book by Frank Waters, the Book of the Hopi, prior to the Great Flood, a bunch of so-called aliens helped them build underground facilities to survive the Great Flood, just like the gigantic caves and caverns in Ecuador, in the Andes Mountains, where you could park a Boeing 727 in, on top of the Andes, and goes all the way down like steps to the Pacific. Under the Pacific, and an opening comes up on an island offshore. And Eric von Donovich, in his book, The Gold of the Gods, this book, they got these sheets here of gold 3 feet high, thicker than aluminum foil you cook with. Here's Eric von Donovich in one of the caves. But apparently, in these caves, they got these 3 feet high gold plates. Look at the drawings of the entities on this thing. Looks like some of them look like poltergeists. Some of them look like aliens. Some of them look like people in ships. Solid gold. Down there in Ecuador, here's one of the priests that's in the area. He's got some of these gold relics. Looks like the pyramid of the all-seeing eye right here. Another one, this looks more like the pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. You can see the snakes and other symbols. Here's one of the pictures of one of the stones. If in a black light it glows fluorescent. And apparently underneath the stone is something like the Pleiades star system, as you can see, and some hieroglyphic letters you can see on the bottom. And it looks like a... So just saying, all over the world there are these monuments. And Eric von Donovich investigated them. Here's some of the alphabet. And of course, lots of books about Atlantis. So me personally, I believe in God, and I believe that Jesus came and was crucified. And if you can understand all this other stuff that we've been talking about, and the Morris Jessup's book, Being in Stasis, popping into this dimension, popping out of it, whether it's ships or entities, it sounds like it kind of matches what the Bible says. Jesus manifesting food, or when he took 2 disciples up to a mountain, there was Moses and I think Isaiah, who were long dead, to meet Jesus, and the 2 apostles said, "You want us to leave you alone?" And they were embarrassed. These 2 beings were glowing like they were entities. And then a cloud came over them, in the Bible now. And from the cloud, a big voice said, "This is my son, whom I am well proud. Listen to him." So apparently this is God, a ship and a cloud, telling the people to listen to Jesus. What concerns me mostly, as in the name of this series, Freemasonry and Satanism, is there are a lot of secrets kept from we the people. And I think the forces and banksters and Zionists and Jesuits and the mafia types running all the corporations and institutions have very evil plans for the rest of us, i.e. maybe 80-90% population reduction, killing off the people on planet Earth, keeping enough people alive to serve them. Worker slaves, entertainment, food maybe, if they're reptilian beings who sacrifice people. Sex slaves, like they're doing now with all this decadent propaganda they're forcing we the people to accept. And of course Obama wanting to increase gun controls, and not just Obama. Whoever the next president will be, Republican or Democrat, the same will continue. There seems to be an event coming. And my curiosity just drives me to ask, who, what, and why? What do we believe? What should we believe? Should we trust the people who are deceiving us 24/7? Sky spraying chemicals on us. Building gigantic microwave HARP transmitters all over the world. Strategic positioning. Controlling the jet stream. Controlling the weather. Causing droughts. Black op projects inventing more plagues and more viruses and forcing vaccines. They got hundreds of vaccines. Will they force everybody to stand in line and take a vaccine? What will they be doing to us? Thank you for watching my video. Rick Marrico reporting.